Final Fantasy 16 is finally out, and I've been having a lot of fun with the game. There is, however, a bit of a divisive opinion about the gameplay, which is pretty much, is it an RPG? It's probably one of the first Final Fantasies that is more action focus, action heavy type of game. And people are wondering, what the hell is this? This is not the Final Fantasy that we all have known and loved. So, because the focus strays away from the traditional aspects of an RPG, especially a JRPG, is this Final Fantasy 16 game an RPG? So, that is the question that we're going to talk about today. I am about 15 hours into the game right now. And again, like I mentioned before, I'm having a lot of fun with the game. I do see what people are talking about. It is extremely action focused. They're switching between all these different skills, and all of them are like really high, flashy, fire everywhere, electricity everywhere, and all these different powers flinging around everywhere. You can do some air juggling and stuff. Plus, your companions can help you out with all that and all the powers and all the spells and just all the sword swinging. Just there's a lot going on each and every battle. And with every battle, you're actually only playing as the main character, Clive, which is also another thing that you didn't see too often, even with other Final Fantasy iterations where it was more action focused. You were able to switch between certain characters. This one focuses mainly on Clive, and that is something that a lot of people are used to with most JRPGs and most Final Fantasy games, is you could play as multiple characters and spec each and every one of those characters. But this one, you can't do that. So if you want to get attached with a character, you're going to have to get attached with that character in the story itself. And the story itself has been amazing. It's very well written, it's very well voice acted, and you can definitely love or hate many of the characters in the game. Another one of those things that people are used to with Final Fantasy, and granted, it's been quite a while, over a decade, since we've really had turn-based RPG for Final Fantasy, anyways. There are plenty of RPGs out there who will give you that itch for a turn-based type of RPG. So I would always suggest to go check out those games. And it kind of seems like Square Enix and the Final Fantasy franchise is, straying away from that. They're kind of done with that. They're more focused on full action-based gameplay and a sprinkle of RPG elements. My gripe with this is that, yes, it is much more heavier on the action. This kind of gives me Devil May Cry type vibes. And yes, I know we have some people who are involved with that, with Devil May Cry, who were involved with this game, but it's very action heavy. Also similar to Strangers in Paradise, which is a spin-off Final Fantasy game, a prequel to pretty much Final Fantasy 1, and it was very action heavy, and it wasn't promoted as an RPG. It was promoted as an action game, and it played very much like an action game, sprinkled in some RPG elements. And a lot of people very much compared it to Dark Souls. It was the Dark Souls game meets Final Fantasy, and it was a really good game. Unfortunately, it wasn't received very well because it wasn't a true Final Fantasy game. Not to say it was a bad game, not to say that it was review bombed all to hell and people hated the game, but it didn't get the exposure that people were expecting, or maybe even Square Enix was expecting as well. But back to Final Fantasy 16, I am loving it. I'm perfectly okay with it being action oriented with a little bit of RPG elements to it. You can't really focus much on stats, and just like many Final Fantasy games, there are a bit linear. And Danny, I was talking with my friend Danny, and he made a good point that most, if not all, Final Fantasy games are actually linear. They just give you the illusion of an open world game. And it's very true. Like, even when I was thinking of Final Fantasy VII, and he was telling me in Final Fantasy VII, for the most part, you get to explore the overworld, but you're only supposed to go one particular direction, and maybe they'll sprinkle in some little side missions here and there that you can run into if you so choose to. But for the most part, it's not like a sandbox or an open world type game. It's extremely linear. And 16 is no different, except it is phenomenally gorgeous. It's just one of the best looking games I've ever seen. And even, people in Square Enix, they said that this game had to be made just for the PS5 because the PS5 was the only system that could handle it. And it almost seems like even the system itself can't handle that as well, because there are reports as well as the PS5 is overheating on some people because the game is asking for so much out of the system that they're getting overheated consoles. Thankfully, mine hasn't done that. It hasn't even really felt that hot to me. It's very well ventilated where I have it. So I've been okay so far, crossing fingers. Now, aside from it being linear and the lack of focusing on particular stats, what you can focus on for your character is equipping certain items. And there aren't really a lot of items, at least from what I'm up to so far, that you can really equip and focus on. I've been holding on to almost the same equipment, my accessories and my sword, whatever I have equipped. Maybe I'll upgrade something here and there. And there's really not much specifics. What they really focus on the most when it comes to tailoring your gameplay, again, action heavy part, is the skills. So as you're fighting, you'll hold down one of your triggers and you'll bring up all these skills that you're able to do on the fly. For example, let's say it's like a Phoenix uppercut, and then you can do a bunch of talon slashing in the air, and then you can kind of do like a thunderbolt slamming down on an enemy and stuff. And all that is easily done by holding down a trigger and then pressing the corresponding button in order to do those moves. Sadly, again, you can't customize the characters. You can't customize your dog, which is pretty much your main companion throughout the story. So there isn't a lot to do, and they do give you some side missions here and there, but they can easily be done in the same area that you've picked up the side mission, and it takes maybe 3 minutes to complete. They haven't really given me much of anything. I'm hoping I'll run into some side missions that'll give me more, whether it be more money, more experience, special items. I hear there's a side mission so you can get your chocobo, which I have not gotten yet. But, so apparently your chocobo is your mount. So again, the side missions are really, they're nothing. They really mean nothing. You can skip them and it won't affect anything for you at all. You can roam around the open world sections. Each section, they load fairly fast, and they have enemies where you can attack and fight at whenever you want, pretty much, and you can grind and level up that way if you'd want to. I think that's probably what I will mostly do in order to level up and make it a bit easier for me throughout the rest of the story. It's funny that they're so focused on all this stuff that they could have just made this another spin-off, so that way they can kind of please, I guess, the real fans for a more traditional Final Fantasy game. But they are trying to get away from that. For whatever reason that is, that's all on them. That's their business plan, there's their focus, that is their vision in the future. That is okay, and they can eventually come out with something more classic if they wanted to. And I'm perfectly fine with that. Like, this could have easily been a spin-off game for like Strangers in Paradise, in the vein of that. But being an actual, next Final Fantasy game, I think it's great. I think it's okay that it's straying away from all of that. It doesn't have to be RPG heavy. It doesn't have to be, exactly a turn-based strategy, have to spec every little detail on your character type thing. It's more about the story and about the action, and I think that's perfectly fine. I can't remember if it was IGN or Game Informer. I was reading an article and they were talking about how God of War Ragnarok is more RPG heavy than Final Fantasy 16. And I honestly, I feel like that's true. With God of War Ragnarok, you can spec your characters very specifically on certain skills, certain attributes, certain defense and offense, and that includes your companion, which was Atreus or Loki, however you want to call him, and any other side characters that you happen to play with as well. So yeah, it's a weird complaint, and I absolutely get it. People are growing up, people are changing, the generation is changing, the industry is changing. Strategy games and turn-based RPGs are a bit more of a niche now for certain players, especially for Americans. They're more into the action. They're more into fast-paced combat. They're more into just like, get me in, get me out quick, and sprinkle in some story here and there. And that's why shooters are very much popular in the United States. So I get that they're trying to get more of an appeal from other people, not just traditional Final Fantasy fans. So that's probably what the idea is, and that's okay. Again, that's perfectly fine. So to the original question, is Final Fantasy 16 an RPG? I perfectly would say yes. I would say it is an action RPG. I would say it's an action game with RPG elements. I definitely wouldn't call it strictly just an RPG. It's definitely not that. And again, when I mentioned, the industry is changing nowadays, many games aren't just one genre anymore. They sprinkle in a lot of other little things in there. So it's not fair to just call something an RPG or an action game or a slasher or a strategy game, whatever it may be. Even shooters now can be MMOs. Shooters now can be rhythm games. It's crazy of all the diversity that you have with gaming now. So it's okay that this game is not what you expected or wanted. There will be other Final Fantasy games, hopefully, and there are other traditional RPGs that you can play as well. There's Bravely Default Part 1 and Part 2 recently came out. There are classic games like Suikoden. There's Octopath Traveler. There's 1 and 2. There's Triangle Strategy. And some of those are made by Square Enix also. So they do focus on traditional JRPGs, just not necessarily for the Final Fantasy franchise. Maybe we'll get another Crystal Chronicles game. Maybe we'll get something in the vein of Final Fantasy 9. You never know in the future, and I'm okay with them experimenting and trying new things. I am enjoying my time with Final Fantasy 16. The story is amazing, which, by the way, Sid is one of my favorite characters in the game so far. And I'm actually really loving this new system where it keeps track of all the little tidbits and details of all the characters, the story that's happened so far, the connections between everything. You can kind of press the touchpad and bring up anything that's involved in the conversation or the current event in, the chapter that you're in right now. And if you're interested in those details, you can read more about it before, during, or after the story is continuing. It's a really cool little system that they got, and I hope that continues in the future. And it's well done. The whole entire game is just very well done. And I look forward to whatever Square Enix has next. Don't forget, I'm all for speaking with anyone who agrees or disagrees with my opinions. And if you would like to let me know yours, please send me an email or DM me. All the links are in gamerguardians.net. The link should be in the show description as well. Thank you for listening in, and I'll see you in the next episode.